Hey, welcome back. We now have collision volumes and we're activating and deactivating collision for these volumes on the enemy character mesh. We're now ready to actually implement damage. So we need to add some variables to our C++ classes for this. Let's go back into C++ and we're going to go into the shooter character. Let's go into shooterCharacter.h and go down to the bottom of our private section so we can add some private variables. We need some variables for health for the character. So I'm going to create a float called health, and I'm going to give this a U property, and we'll make this edit anywhere. Blueprint read write, category combat, and I'm going to copy the meta specifier from the above macro. Now let's give this a comment and just say character health. Now we have a health variable. We also need a max health variable. So let's go ahead and copy this. And for this variable, we're going to call this max health. And the comment can say character max health. That way we have a current health value and a max health value. And if we take the ratio of these two, then we know the percentage that we can use to drive a health bar. Now we need to give our new variables default values. So let's go into our shooterCharacter.cpp, and here in the constructor, I'm going to initialize health, and let's give this a value of 100.f, and let's give max health also 100.f. So now that our character has health, we need to know how much damage our enemy can cause. So we're going to go into the enemy.h and add a private variable to the enemy for damage. So we need a variable for damage. I'm going to create a float called base damage. And we can give this a U property macro and make this edit anywhere, blueprint read write, and I'll give it category combat meta allow private access equals true, and I'm going to create a comment for this and say base damage for enemy. Now let's give this a default value in enemy.cpp up here in the constructor, and I'll give this a value of say 20. I think that's pretty fair. And we want to implement damage. So that means the shooter character has to be able to take damage. So we're going to override the take damage function on the shooter character. Now, take damage is a public function, so we're going to override it in our public section. I'm going to put it in this top public section where the constructor is. So we're going to create a comment here and say take combat damage. So we're going to override take damage. So this is going to be a virtual float function, and it's going to be called take damage. And take damage takes a float for the damage amount. It takes a struct called f damage event. It's a const reference, and it's called damage event. Now I'm going to start putting these input parameters each on their own line here. Now next we have a controller, I'm forward declaring it here, called event instigator. And finally an A actor pointer called damage causer. Now this is an override, so we need the override keyword. So here we're overriding take damage. Okay, so we have take damage. Let's go ahead and create a function body for this. Now let's go ahead and implement take damage. Now we have a damage amount here, and we need to check to see if this damage amount will bring us down to 0 or lower. So we're going to say if health minus damage amount is less than or equal to 0.f. Now if that's the case, we're going to set health equal to 0.f just so we don't go down below 0, and else we're going to subtract damage amount from health. So health minus equals damage amount. Now this is all set up to handle death, because once health reaches 0, we can create a function for death and call that here. Now this function returns a float, so we can simply return damage amount. So now that the shooter character implements a take damage function, we can apply damage whenever the enemy hits the character with its weapons. So let's go into enemy.cpp and find our overlap functions, and we call them on left and right weapon overlap. So here's on left weapon overlap. We need to apply damage here. So first I'm going to check to see if other actor is not null. So if other actor equals null pointer, return. Now next, I'm going to cast other actor to a character. So I'm going to say auto character equals cast to a shooter character, and we're casting other actor. Now, if character, then we know we've hit the character. Now, if we've hit the character, we can apply damage. And Gameplay Statics has applied damage, which will result in the character calling take damage. So we need Gameplay Statics, and if we scroll up, we'll see that that's the second include we have here. So we're good. So back here in onLeft weapon overlap, we're going to call the Gameplay Statics apply damage function. So Gameplay Statics apply damage, and the first input is the damaged actor. That's going to be the character. Now next we have a float for the base damage, for which we're going to use our base damage. Now the next parameter is the controller, and we have our enemy controller, so we're going to pass that in. Now after the controller is an actor called damage causer. We're going to use this since the enemy is the damage causer. And finally, we have a T subclass of for damage type. Now we haven't defined any custom damage types, so we're just going to use damage type static class. And that's going to satisfy all the inputs for applied damage. Now, we're going to do the same exact thing on right weapon overlap. So we're going to copy and paste that. And since we're reusing code here, which is not very efficient, we can abstract this away into its own function that takes an actor. So here in enemy.h, let's go up to the protected section and create a void function called doDamage. And this can take an A actor pointer, and we'll just call this victim. And I'm going to implement this here just above onLeft weapon overlap. I'm going to fully qualify the function name here, and I'm just going to copy the code in onLeft weapon overlap, paste it in here, and instead of other actor, we're going to use the victim input parameter. So we're simply checking to see if victim is not null. Now we also need to replace other actor with victim here as well in our cast. So we're simply checking to see if victim is null. If it is, we return. Then we cast victim to character. If character is valid, then we call apply damage, passing in character, base damage, our enemy controller, this, and the static class for damage type. Now we can call doDamage instead of using copied code in our overlap functions. So here in onLeft weapon overlap, we're going to call doDamage using other actor as the input parameter. And we're going to copy this and paste it right here in onRight weapon overlap. And if we need to do different things with our left and right weapons, we can simply change our doDamage function in the future. All right, so now we have damage implemented. Let's go ahead and compile this and test it out in the editor. Okay, we're back in the editor and we're ready to test this out. Now let's go to enemy BP, and with our mesh selected, let's uncheck pause anims. That way our animations will no longer be paused. And another thing I noticed is that our enemy needs its combat range sphere to be a bit bigger. I'm going to increase this just a bit. Let's put it to about 180 or so. That way the enemy won't get so close before it attacks. And the reason I'm doing this is because if we go back into the animation and we scrub through to about here where the enemy is reaching far, if the character is standing right here too close to the enemy, then the weapon is just going to overshoot and we're not even going to get that collision. Now, of course, we can fix this by increasing that collision volume by going into enemy BP, pausing the anims, and taking these collision volumes and scaling them to include just about the entire weapon. So we can do something like this. And here's the right weapon collision. We can increase the size of that like so. So that's going to help as well. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save that. But also, we do want that sphere to be a bit bigger so that we can ensure that the enemy will stop an attack when the character is about this distance away. Okay, so we can unpause the anims again, compile, save that, and let's give this a test run. Now I'm going to hit play and search for shooter in the world outliner and select the shooter character and search for health in the details panel, and here we can see the health variable. Let's go ahead and get attacked, and there it goes down to 80, then 60, then 40, and 20, and now it's 0. So we see that damage is working. Excellent. That is going to conclude this video. We now have an enemy that will attack the player and actually cause damage. Amazing. Next, we need to create a health bar for the character so we can see this when we're playing the game. We'll take care of that in a future video. I'll see you soon.